Hi, welcome to my talk on Applied AI Ethics, Building Ethical, Safe, and Inclusive AI Apps to Fight COVID-19. I'm Abhishek Gupta, the founder of the Montreal AI Ethics Institute and a machine learning engineer at Microsoft. So here's a quick overview of what we're going to be covering in our talk today. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Montreal AI Ethics Institute and myself. I'm going to give an overview of the recommendations that are going to tie all of the content in the presentation together. It's going to form the underlying thread for all the recommendations that I provide for the 5 challenge areas. And then we're going to dive into each of the 5 challenge areas, which is health and wellness, education, empowerment, supporting vulnerable groups, and the environment. What I'll do in each of those segments is going to talk about some of the ethical challenges that you might face when trying to build an AI-enabled solution for them, and give you links to a couple of concrete tools that you can apply to mitigate some of the harms that can arise from deploying an AI-based solution to address some of the challenges. Finally, we'll conclude with some of the opportunities at the Institute. If you find the content that we covered today interesting, you might be interested in some of the projects that we have ongoing at the Institute, and you might want to work together with us, and the information for that will be on there. I'll also highlight some of the reading groups that we have ongoing at the Institute, which is a great way to become involved with the work that we're doing and at the same time build up your skills in this very important domain of AI ethics. Also, I'd like to draw your attention to the Twitter accounts, both for myself and the Institute. We also have a newsletter that goes out every week that covers the latest in research and development within the field of AI ethics. We usually take a deep dive and make accessible a lot of the technical research technical and policy research that happens in the domain. And we also share some of the guest contributions from our research network within the newsletter. Finally, there's also a link for feedback on the talk, so if you have any comments or suggestions on how we can do better, please don't hesitate in sending feedback through that link. All right, so the Montreal AI Ethics Institute is an international nonprofit research institute whose primary function is to build public competence in AI ethics. We have a lot of research initiatives at the Institute which are centered on applied technical and policy measures to build ethical, safe, and inclusive AI systems. And I'll talk more about some of the ongoing projects that we have, but we focus on 4 key areas, which are disinformation, privacy, labor impacts of AI, and machine learning security. I myself also work as a machine learning engineer at Microsoft, where I serve on the Responsible AI board. And I get to work across a variety of domains, building practical solutions and applying the latest and greatest in AI techniques as a part of my work. So for all the recommendations that are going to follow and the tools that are going to follow for each of the challenge areas, 2 things to keep in mind are that we're looking to use AI systems to augment human capacity rather than replace it. And from all of the research and the work that we've done, what we found to work best is the combination of humans and AI systems. So not utilizing one or the other in exclusion, but leveraging the best that each of those have to offer gives us the best chance at solving some of these really tough challenges. And secondly, making responsible AI the norm rather than the exception is a very important principle, because the more AI systems start to get deployed and used across the world, we need to ensure that we're doing so in a manner that is ethical, safe, and inclusive, and doesn't cause any unnecessary harms by the use of that technology. So let's jump into the first challenge area that we have for the hackathon, which is health and wellness. And this is very critical because, especially in healthcare, we have the potential to impact human lives in a very significant manner. And we're seeing that happen with COVID-19 in terms of how many people are being impacted and the solutions that are being deployed to address some of that. It's very, very important that we do so in a manner that actually brings as much benefit as possible while mitigating the unintended consequences and harms. Now, some of the things that you can try and do are to help automate some of the mundane and repetitive stuff for frontline workers, which is a place where a lot of the errors tend to creep in because our frontline workers are overwhelmed with a lot of the work that they have to do, working overtime, and it would be great if we can aid them in at least automating some of the mundane and repetitive stuff so that they can work on things that are more that require a great degree of human contact and human touch, and enabling them to use their skills in a manner that actually supports the patients, and not so much in data entry and other things that can actually be automated. The one thing to keep in mind there is that we need to aim for very low tolerance of errors, because again, anything that goes wrong here can have cascading effects, and given that everybody is overwhelmed and the system, there isn't enough time to make corrections of any errors that might creep in. We need to be extra careful in terms of how many errors we let creep in because of that automation process. And for any tools that you build, for example, chatbots that provide information on sort of self-diagnosing symptoms and when to go in for testing, or even seeking information on how to practice social distancing properly, it's important not only to present that information in an accessible manner, but also to make sure that you're combating disinformation correctly, especially in the cases where you're crowdsourcing some of that information, or you're scraping a variety of websites to gather that information. Now, in that case, one of the things to think about is, well, how do you do that effectively? So from a practical perspective, the two tools that I would recommend is to look at Captain Fact, which helps to fight disinformation, and it's a crowdsourced tool where people can use their time and efforts to help combat disinformation. And PySift, which is basically a Python library that will help you maintain privacy of the healthcare data. So it essentially allows you to do encrypted, privacy-preserving machine learning. For the education challenge area, we're seeing that a lot of schools are now shifting to an online means of discourse, and again, a lot of people are quickly trying to adapt to deliver the educational experience in a manner that they haven't really experimented with before. And so there's very fast adoption of a lot of new tools. What's important to keep in mind here is that student data and data of minors is something that has special privacy laws in place, and to make sure that you're following those guidelines and regulations and legislations when you're building any solution. So, for example, for the United States, you have the COPPA and the FERPA, which give regulatory and legislative guidelines on how to protect privacy of student data. And for solutions where you might look at something like automated grading, it's again very important to pay attention to where unwanted biases might creep in. And an example for that could be trying to ascertain the underlying elements in or the underlying linguistic elements from an essay, and then grading it based on that. But that might skew the solution towards grading only a particular kind of essays with a high grade, and some others with a low grade based on prior historical data, which is something that human teachers are often cognizant of, and they recognize a difference in styles and how people respond and write essays and express themselves. So that's something to keep in mind. Some of the tools that you can use practically here are Facets, which gives you a visual understanding of bias in data sets, and the Equitas bias audit toolkit, which again gives you another set of tools to investigate bias within the data sets that you're using. Now, on the empowerment challenge area, one of the key pieces of technology that everybody is talking about, and if you're interested in this hackathon about COVID-19, you've definitely heard this term before, called contact tracing. Now, I want to say before we even dive into what contact tracing is and how it can help, that it is definitely a great complement. but it only works when we also ramp up testing and other medical infrastructure, which would work together with the contact tracing solution, because any of these things in isolation aren't sufficient to combat COVID-19. Um, essentially, with contact tracing, what we do is we try to figure out who a symptomatic or a carrier or an identified carrier of COVID-19 has been in touch with or has been in contact with recently, and then to alert those people to also get themselves tested and to self-isolate, so that they prevent the spread of the disease further. Now, one of the biggest issues that's raised with with a variety of contact tracing solutions is the issue of privacy. What we have with the technological tools that are disposable at our disposal today is that we don't necessarily need to make a trade-off between privacy and achieving better public health outcomes. And on the Montreal AI Ethics Institute website, we've documented some practical advice on how you can build privacy-preserving contact tracing solutions, where we go into depth into concepts like federated learning, differential privacy, along with tools that you can use to implement those concepts in practice. There's also the DP3T framework, which gives you another way of applying privacy preserving proximity tracing in a decentralized manner. Now, one of the things that the WHO has identified is that in addition to all the harms that are being caused to physical health from the pandemic, there is also an infodemic that is taking place, where there's a lot of disinformation that's spreading about what to do, what measures to take, and even things like when a variety of places are open and closed, and basically sowing a lot of confusion into the minds of people, so that they don't really follow the guidelines from the authoritative and authentic sources of information, like the health authorities and the government. So one of the other things to keep in mind there is, well, how can we combat that disinformation so that we empower people to make the right decisions? Now, one of the areas that we're focusing on at the Institute is to look at neurofake news, which is fake news that is generated by automated means rather than having humans generate them. And the important thing to point out there is that we believe that is going to become a problem that's going to have an increasing impact because it scales quite easily and is quite easy to replicate and spread on a variety of social media and news networks. And so Grover is a tool from Allen AI NLP that basically allows you to combat some of this automated fake news, and it could be something that you could investigate further into utilizing in the solutions that you build as a part of the hackathon. Now, in the challenge area of supporting vulnerable groups, one of the things that we're seeing with this pandemic is that a lot of people are being adversely affected, not only in terms of their finances, but also in terms of their health and their families. And so any solutions that we build should make sure that we can enable more fair and equitable outcomes. And for example, if we think about gig workers who face a lot of fluctuations in their earnings, especially in times of such hardship, if we can look at solutions that enable a more equitable distribution of work that helps to smoothen the impact of earnings fluctuations for them, that would be something that would be very useful. On the other hand, with a lot of social distancing requirements and workplaces shutting down, content moderation has been turned over to automated tools, and humans are not doing that as much as they were before. So it's important again to look at some tools that can do this in a way where we don't let false, or rather we don't let information that is meaningful be flagged as false and then be removed from a platform without any redress. And to that end, the Azure Content Moderation tool, which helps you review images, text, and videos, offers a machine-assisted methodology for reviewing content, and allows you to set content filtering based on a variety of factors. Uh, and on the issue of fairness, you could look at the FairLearn tool, which is an open source tool that helps to mitigate some of the unseen fairness issues. In the environment challenge area, it's very interesting now that we're seeing that as human activity has started to go down, there is a marked decrease in some of our carbon emissions and the impact of climate change. But again, that is only temporary, and without sustained efforts, it's not going to be something that we see extend into the future unless we make active efforts towards it. So. Some of the things that you can look into are visualizing the impact of climate change so that we can better move people to action. You can also look at measuring the impact of machine learning in terms of energy uses. A lot of you who are participating in this hackathon are probably aware that machine learning is something that's very computationally expensive, and getting a sense for what the environmental impact in terms of energy is when you utilize a variety of machine learning models is that'll help you to make reasonable choices when you're trying to balance, let's say, using a more complicated model versus trying to have a smaller impact in terms of the energy use. And so something practical that you can look at here is this paper that uses cycle GANs to visualize the impacts of climate change, and this carbon calculator that tells you how much energy the GPU is using based on the energy mix and the source mix at the time and place where your models are being trained, and it gives you a good sense for creating a statement from that that gives you an idea for what the energy and climate change impact is of the machine learning models that you're using. So again, as I had said in the beginning, if you have any feedback on this talk, like, we're very happy to hear from you, and you can do so at this link, which is also at the bottom of the slides. And now, quickly, if you found some of the areas of research and AI ethics that I mentioned interesting, really quickly, these are the four initiatives or four areas that we have ongoing at the Institute. So the first one is on disinformation, where we're looking at technical and design interventions to combat climate change related disinformation. And we have an interdisciplinary team that's working on it with backgrounds in media psychology, inclusive design, machine learning, newsrooms, human rights, and ethics experience. We also have the privacy area, where we're working on a trust-based framework for enhancing applications trying to combat COVID-19. And we have on the team legal, ethics, and machine learning experience. The other area is the labor impacts of AI. So we're working on building iconic demonstrations for galvanizing low-skilled workers to operate to the right skills for the future of work. And there we have ethics, machine learning, and inclusive design experience on the team. And finally, we have machine learning security, which is an emerging area where we're building cross-domain competence through educational tools. And we have cybersecurity and machine learning experience on that team. And in case you're interested in any of these areas and interested in working with us on that, please feel free to send an email to support@montrealethics.ai. And finally, if you're looking to just learn with us, we host weekly reading groups on these 5 areas, and we more than welcome people from any levels of experience and any backgrounds to be a part of that learning journey with us. And they're on the areas of disinformation, privacy, labor impacts of AI, machine learning security, and complex systems theory. And if you want to join in, please feel free to send an email to support@montrealethics.ai with the subject of the reading group topic, join request, and whichever area it is that you're interested in learning about. So that's it for the presentation from my side. I'm going to be sticking around for questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this talk, and I wish you all the best in the hackathon. Please take this opportunity to work with peers from across the world, learn from each other, and take this opportunity to build something that can really have a positive impact on the world. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.